Okay, very nice. So I'm going to be making a video today. Hello, my lovely friends. Uh, Hope you all are having a wonderful day. I'm going to talk a little bit about poker, but again, I don't think I'm good enough strategically at the moment, and I don't want to have so many strategic conversations. Uh, I do want to talk about mental game. I do want to talk about the aspects of improving our sort of imagination, expanding our minds. There are a lot of different topics that I want to talk about around psychology and poker and the human condition and the various blind spots that we as Homo sapiens happen to have. I don't have a particular topic though that I can think of off the top of my head, so I'm going to listen to some birds. Let's hear the birds. The birds are outside and they sound wonderful, don't they? Very often the mind wants to go, 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 go and get more information. But actually, the idea that we need more information is not true. This is a very silly illusion. I mean, again, we could first of all say, what do we need? What are we trying to accomplish? So, say someone comes to a YouTube video and say the goal is to, there can be many simultaneous goals. So, at this moment, say someone has finished eating dinner and they're hungry and they say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to eat some food. But part of that, they may also have the intention to get better at poker, right? So they may open their YouTube, they may want some entertainment. They also might want to think about things a little bit critically, but enjoy. So video is a very efficient format for this because you're able to multitask. You're able to relax, wind down. These things are very efficient. Then there are other tools like PioSolver, etc. But what is trying to be accomplished? So the mind always wants to go fast, 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 because it believes that the well-being, even though this may be an unconscious thought in people, something in the subconscious that one is not aware of, but there is an idea that the more one knows, the more one acquires in terms of knowledge, which knowledge is just like a hallucination. Okay, it's not really real. It's very similar to like taking like marijuana or LSD or some other drug. It gives you, in fact, those are probably a lot better because they would probably smash a lot of uh, false beliefs. In fact, but they're very similar because they give you this idea that you know because you can parrot or recite a set of words that someone else can perceive. We get this feeling, right? I get this great feeling that I am a knower. I am very knowledgeable because I'm able to recite some words, then someone else can see me, then I can convince myself that I know what to do on this board because I can click in PioSolver and hit the right buttons, or in GTO Trainer, I can click all these right buttons and it gives me about the right approximation, and therefore I know I'm playing extremely well. But of course, those don't mean anything in terms of how I actually play hands at the table. They're absolutely fine as well. Very good tools to study. But we cannot actually have this knowledge that we are good. So very often the human brain wants to say, I know that I'm getting better. And it wants some sort of confirmation. In fact, this is not how the imagination works. This is not how the memory works. Uh, I believe that the brain always wants to do some sort of task. But in fact, when we really start to look at studying and how to get better, memory is not particularly helpful in poker. It's helpful for the actual format, but not in terms of the theory and understanding why things happen. Of course, our brain is basically like a supercomputer, way millions of times more powerful than PioSolver could ever dream of, because PioSolver is just solving for how to win zero. So it's computing a Nash equilibrium strategy. We are simultaneously we are making decisions against many different opponents that are playing each other, and they all have completely different strategies, and each combination that we have will have a completely different expectation depending on, well, actually we don't have access to what the expectation is, right? So we don't know it, but certainly it will be derived from how we play our cards, and that EV of how we play our cards is not dependent on, or say it's interdependent of our opponent's decisions as well. And we are going to say make our decisions based off of what we think our opponent is going to do, how they're going to react, say right now in this hand or in the future, all these things. There's a lot to consider. Uh, I want to talk a little bit about Taoism, which comes from China. There was a great man about 2,500, 2,600 years ago. His name was Lao Tzu. He actually did not write almost anything, but I think that talking about these kind of philosophies is very good for the sake of giving examples, because there was a philosopher named Confucius, and he believed that the individual was not very important, right? But he believed in more of kind of like the way of the society. We need to rule men. We need to be very strict. We need to control. Okay, and you had someone like Lao Tzu, Chung Tzu, many different Taoist masters actually over the years. Dao, Tao, it depends on the dialect that you're using. So one thing that we find in Taoism is the idea of things mutually arising, for instance. So we see a deer and we see a lion, and these things mutually arise. But in logic, logic again, to be very clear, what is logic? Logic is not reality. That's for damn sure, of course, because reality is just things that you can perceive through your five senses, things that are in front of you, not your own pictorial thought, your own imagination about concepts somewhere that's not in front of you. That's important to realize. So logic is a way to kind of dissect ideas, to make, not necessarily make predictions, but it's a tool that we can use, but it's not reality. Now, what is reality? Say there's a glass of water in front of us, right? Okay. And say now we can use this metric, we can say that there's 300 milliliters of water in that thing. Now this metric is arbitrary. We've all agreed that ml, milliliters, means something. And then when we get to it, we all, we have these measurement systems, but we create our own meaning. Now, some people may go to this class and may have the idea that if I call this thing half full, then I may be perceived by other people as positive, and they may want to be with me more, and they may like me more, and therefore I will be a better person. Of course, they may not be conscious of this. They may not even think this. Or they may say the glass is half full. I believe that this example is essentially given, or this glass half full empty is given because there's this very delusional belief that if you use words and you describe reality, then somehow your perception of reality changes. No, you're very delusional if you think this. It does, but only on the absolute most bare superficial ways. And if you have not gone past that, then I'm very sorry, my friend. But there are levels of equanimity far beyond being identified with your brain telling you that you will be a more positive person because you see something half full or empty. Now, what is reality? Nothing can be said about that glass of water. Again, the water is not 300 fucking milliliters. It's just an agreement that we made with a set of labels. Reality is just what is perceived. It's not the extra. If we perceive extra labels on it, then we are confusing our own thoughts with reality. If we are confusing, even the word water is not water. Water is a symbol that is perceived within our own brain. We don't directly know water. Sure, we can say we are made up of 70% water and therefore we know water. But what are we really? We are not that water. We're not necessarily just the body. Sure, we are a combination of parts. And this combination of parts that's coming into experience, that is life, this combination of parts that has created this experience, certainly has water. H2O. I'm not a scientist, but you can say H2O, right? But the thing that is aware or that is speaking, say actually there's just speaking. There's no one that's speaking. Okay, there's just speech. But the brain creates a sort of superimposed hallucination that there is someone speaking. And what it does is it creates all these characteristics on top of the human being that it perceives, just as it will create extra labels on top of simply the glass of water. There's simply a flesh, blood, whatever the fuck a body consists of. I'm not a biologist. I've never studied about that. But you get the point, right? I think that should be fairly logical, fairly clear, that all these things that we put on top are not anything more than a projection of ourselves. So we say, this guy is mean. But how do we know he's mean? Because he used some words, okay? And then say he used some certain tone. So we can make observations, and then we can say things about reality in those observations. And of course, we can speak about the meaning, but it's very important to be able to differentiate reality from our own thoughts when it comes to poker. Now, if you want to get better at poker, this intuition muscle, it's not something where you say, I believe this and I'm not going to go deeper into logic. The reason why we don't go deeper and it's painful is because the more we go deeper, the more we see our own self-contradictory logic. Everybody is absolutely, completely self-contradictory. And this is painful. So we create more and more structures on top of our current knowledge to add more and make it seem as though we know more and more. But what game are we playing? So is there this, first of all, there's an idea in my mind. I don't know if anybody shares this, but I have this belief that if I acquire more knowledge, then somehow it will make me better. But a lot of the ideas, the associated, when I say why is that the case, it always has to do with being perceived by another person as knowledgeable and good enough. Now, of course, at some level there can be money, but what does money do? I mean, money basically gives you comfort. It doesn't really do anything. It's a utility. It's like, I have X dollars, well, I have X manpower. At some level, in the sense that I don't need to build this house, but I can give someone money, and then they can eat, they get something, right? Or I can go to a job, I'm giving my time, and then I can get some tool. It's not like you can like eat money and then you'll become happy, obviously, right? So money doesn't have anything to do with happiness. It just has to do with a little bit of comfort. But of course, if we're still, if we're comfortable and then we're not happy, well, that's a very different scenario. One of the basic illusions of the ego is that things outside of it, like, okay, so we are islands on ourselves. We're just a brain, we're just a body, and then we're experiencing reality. But again, it's not like when we see this money, all that's happening is that we believe that it will make us feel better. It's a belief inside of our unconscious, but it's so deeply set in there because of all of this social conditioning over such a long period. We don't actually have control. We can say like, yes, I don't believe that money is important, but actually we can say those words, but those have nothing to do with our beliefs. Those are just vibrations out of the air. Now the brain may believe that because I say I believe this, I do, but actually no, because the one that's talking is just a fractal piece of the whole machine. We are the perceiver. We are not the one that's... We're observing everything. We are the observer. We are not necessarily the body. We are as well, but it depends on the angle that you're looking. All of this is taking place inside of us. All of these thoughts about how we're going to play our opposition, what they're going to think about our turn check in this situation. Very interesting. I love the bird sounds. They remind me that I can be natural. When I was a kid and I used to talk, people used to bully me. They would tell me that you shouldn't talk so much, you should be quiet. And then I see a bird and there's no one judging them, there's no one talking badly to them. They're just very, very happy. They're just very, very free. And I think that's very beautiful. Um, So yes, let's see if something else arises. But this is a good topic to be talking about. And also looking at the poker. I've played a bit of poker, and I played a little bit Insane this session, and it was quite fun. I mean, I didn't really play Insane, actually, but it was fun. I've been playing Short Stacked, and yeah, I don't even know how to play short stacked. I've never done it before. But we kind of move into the unknowable. And very often the brain has, played like previously, it's played like I'm going to RFI 2.5x and I'm never going to play a new strategy because it's painful, because my mind personally says, oh no, I cannot try to learn new things because I don't want to be like a jack of all trades. I want to get my thing down. I want to get it. But what is this whole accomplishing thing? So I want to do something, but why do I want to do something? Because I had this idea in mind that if I do it, then what? This is very important to analyze the then what. Then I will have money. Then if I have money, then what? Then I'm better than other people at poker. Um, so there's an interesting idea, again, in Taoist philosophy. Um, about the mutually arising things. But when it comes to strategy, it's very, very, very hard to actually think holistically, because what's happening when we're thinking? The brain has a very hard time, at least in the separated state of consciousness, where the brain believes that it is a separate entity from the rest of existence. There is a point where, say, our brain may realize that, oh, wow, I'm putting water inside of my body and now I'm adding a new part and I'm still claiming that I'm the same individual. And I am sitting here and then I go read a book, I'm listening to this YouTube video, and when I leave, I think I'm still the same individual. Uh, yes, I don't think that this is the case, right? So this is basically just a false belief that is coming out of a sort of superimposed hallucination of the past and future, which we don't have direct access to. Right? Again, look in front of us. So if there's an idea that anything exists instead of what's in front of us, we're simply confusing the contents of our unconscious mind with our conscious mind. It's not like anything exists outside of what's in front of us. Not that we can see, not that we can taste, not that we can smell. These are all our imaginations. In poker, in order to even get slightly good, even to get any depth at all, we absolutely have to separate truths from falsehoods. There's this thing called spirituality, right? Essentially, spirituality is a method for remembering the essence of our true nature. It is remembering that we are not the ego. Spirituality is a set of methods for differentiating truth from falsehoods. So spirituality is not an end in and of itself. In fact, it's a means to an end, to remember who you are. It's not something to identify with. That would be a very foolish thing to think, I am a spiritual person. No, of course not. You've created a new identity for your ego. You also have to dissolve that identity as well if you want to have no ego and be free. And that's, I'm not saying that, maybe the odds of us having no ego and being free, what is that? Very little, but at least having the capacity of thinking strategically past one frame scenarios. So what is it actually that is so challenging about thinking about things simultaneously? Right now, if I say the word game tree poker, the brain will imagine game tree poker and it will believe that it understands it. First of all, game tree poker, what does that even mean? So we're playing like a 6 max no limit game tree, couple bet sizings, whatever. Now we have just like a gajillion nodes. So no, let's just slice right through the bullshit and realize that no, we cannot know that. But we can always imagine that we know that. Differentiating this imagination when we hear someone talk and then there's a story and there's pictorial thought from this fact that we actually don't have the capacity to necessarily know. We can understand sort of the meaning, but we don't have the capacity to know the EVs. I say this many times, and I don't mean to be so repetitive, but the thing is that the eye cannot see the eye, and this is the most important thing. People will study for 10 hours, 20 hours, 40 hours, things that don't matter, but then it's so painful to look at the one thing that matters that they will try to avoid it and say, yeah, I got it, let's move on. And I would say that probably 99% of people that actually play poker would not ever want to listen to anything that I have to say, because I think that I'm quite repetitive, and that's annoying. It can be annoying, right? So there are words, and then there may be a perceiver that doesn't want to hear the same thing over and over again because their brain unconsciously is saying, I understand, and it's insulting to them to be told the same thing because they understand already. But what is not understood is that all there are a combination of words, and the understanding, what I'm trying to say, is beyond words. Trying to allow the mind to be able to expand. So it has the capacity to think strategically, in depth, while it simultaneously is able to consider many options. Not unconsciously and then giving an intuition, which that is absolutely beautiful and far superior to just simply believing our own brains. The intellect is very different. It's a lot more surgical. It cuts through a lot more bullshit if we're willing to really continue to question ourselves until it's very painful and then go even more. But every single description is necessarily comparative. That's very important. So I cannot say that I believe that this A7-2 is good. That doesn't mean anything. I think that betting this is good. When I say that, it's always compared to another idea that I have. But very often the brain creates this model of this other idea that I have and just says, that's what it is and this is good. Because it's very hard to realize that this is just a combination of vibrations in the air that I'm sticking out there, and we're not actually making money by me saying these words and attempting to convince someone that I understand something when I don't. It's not, those things are not, it doesn't work that way. It's not the nature of reality. So for instance, I say, I think betting A7-2 is a good play on this board. I think checking is good. I'm going to do this or that. Why did you do this? Well, it's because we're comparing it to a current model that we have of a bunch of other scenarios. First of all, the scenarios are in the infinitesimal trillions. So you may be able to make the statement that I think that open raising aces is higher EV than folding. First of all, it's not necessarily. Absolutely not. So it's very possible that you could be an incredibly weak poker player and your only strategic option is to open to 2 big blinds and you're like 10,000 big blinds deep. And you just should not fucking play the game because you're going to play against people who are going to destroy you. And whenever you have aces, they're not going to put money in because you don't put money in with anything else, right? So there are ways for this not to be the case, where aces could be higher EV. So this idea that it's always higher EV, no. This is predicated on a comparison to what would happen when you fold. Fold is 0, but then we cannot know that opening them is higher EV. It might hurt your feelings to hear that. It might hurt a recreational player who's playing against very good players, but the recreational player, for instance, their brain might tell them that they're winning. If we watch a lot of poker players that play, the majority of them think that they're winning. If we look at the statistics, almost no one does, but no one will tell you that. So this is the way that the brain creates its own cognitive bias. It always thinks that it understands, but other people don't, because the brain creates a model of the world and creates an identity. With me, I'm doing well, or it may punish itself. But in fact, very often what happens is that we may play a role where we appear to be humble with other people, but deep down on some unconscious level, we actually feel like we're doing the right thing. We know what we're doing. Simultaneously, we may feel that we're not doing the right thing, but that feeling of not doing the right thing does not actually lead us to questioning our decisions and making better things. It often actually has the opposite effect, where we try to just cram more into that. Yes, this is the reason why ace-7 too. This is the reason why we're betting, and not look at the other possible scenarios. We never want to find an answer because there's nothing to be identified with in poker. There are no answers. The only thing that we do in science, scientists don't have opinions. They make observations. They're not attached to their opinions, and if they are, absolutely fine. We would not know that anyways, because all we can know is the words that they say. And then our brain creates a model of whether or not we think they are attached to their words or not. And that will simply be a projection of our own unconscious. And if we're very vain and we think that people are bad and not nice, then we will think that everybody is bad. And if we feel, and that's absolutely fine. That's not something that we have conscious control over. So we don't want to deny that aspect if we're always judging or we're always thinking that people are amazing or whatever. As long as we have any labels, if we think that we think of this guy's a good guy and then we'll be perceived better, remember, compared to thinking of him bad, no, because we're still identified with our own thoughts. This has nothing to do with well-being. It has nothing to do with playing poker well. If we're in the state of consciousness where we have a person in our head commentating on what we should do when we're playing poker, it's probably very normal. I would say that everybody has a voice in their head. But watch what this voice in the head is actually saying. Watch how consistent it is. Watch how irrational it is, and watch what it's trying to avoid, because we are not actually that voice. We are actually the witness of that voice. That voice simply arises through the totality of all of our past experiences, all of our knowledge, all of our memories, all of the associations that we've made, absolutely not just in the category of poker. Pure delusion if someone thinks that. If you think you can separate your life from poker, you don't know anything about life or poker. That should be a pretty obvious fact. Now, there's this thing that the human mind has. It's this thing called the capacity to doubt. Okay, so a tree exists and it doesn't doubt things. Now, it doesn't have a brain or a heart, so maybe that's not a very good example. Let me give the example of another Homo sapien. Okay, so we are sitting with a child, and we are playing a little game of poker because, I'm a degenerate father. I want to teach my child to be a great gambler. It will be very fun. And my son says, "A great hand, Adam." After I beat him for a big pot. Now, my brain feels very lovely. I feel nice. I say, "Oh, yes, I love you, son. That's wonderful." Now, I play with another friend. Okay, online, we're playing, and then I win some big hand against him, and then he says, "Nice hand," just in text. Whatever, same exact words as my son. I can't remember what I said, but something like that, right? Okay. Notice as I don't hear his vocal inflections. I don't see his face. I don't see his body language. And I feel there's an idea that when he loses the hand, he will be angry. And when he says nice hand, he will not mean nice hand because he will have the perception that losing resources is something that he should be angry at me for. He will play this little character that anytime I lose, I'm going to hate everybody. This kind of like role, whatever the case. Or maybe he actually has these emotions where he will be angry. I don't know. It depends on if he thinks that losing $100 when his bankroll is like, or losing $500 or $1,000 when he has $100,000 in his bank account, and that's certainly enough to have food and water, so he's not in any sort of threat whatsoever for his life. But there are still these massive emotions that may sort of overtake someone. Now again, I don't have access to that though, right? So all I see is the word nice hand, but I'm starting to imagine all these things about what he thinks about me. He was being sarcastic. He was saying like this. He was saying like that. No. These are my own mind. This is my own projection of my own mind. This is no one else. I am the one that is saying that he is speaking like this. Why did it not arise with my son? Because I understand that my son, and I don't understand it consciously. I simply see things just as I don't think consciously, oh yes, walking to the refrigerator, it has all this great food. No, I'm daydreaming about something else in some other world about how I'm going to pay the rent. So I'm just walking to my refrigerator unconsciously, not thinking, but everything is just kind of happening. I'm putting the sandwich meat on, I'm getting the cheese, whatever the case is. But I'm thinking about something else. So I'm not completely conscious of why it's happening, what's happening, but my reaction is the same. Put the mayonnaise in correctly. Same with my son. When my son says nice hand, I just feel very good. I feel happy. But my brain, I am unconsciously reading his face. Somewhere deep down, I also understand that children don't have the capacity for sarcasm because they don't have the capacity to doubt. When someone says words, let's say Joe is talking and John is listening. When Joe says, I'm very happy today, say John has this thought on top of that, right? There's only perception. So he actually has his ears and then he perceives words. But then say he has a voice in his head or emotions, things that put stuff on top of that. And the voice in his head says, wow, what? What? This guy yesterday said he was unhappy. Now he's very inconsistent. What is going on? And then a new thing might arise, right? Like this mechanism does not exist in a child because their brain has not created this kind of like time-bound, superimposed hallucination of like the personality of the human that we're talking to, all our past history, how we're supposed to react. It doesn't have that because they simply are. There is a certain isness that is there, that we can relate to far beyond just kind of trying to be liked and say the right things and this kind of thing. The child is already far beyond that. Absolutely far beyond that. Now, life is very, very, very dialectical. And this is very important because in ordinary logic, I believe that the mind thinks in terms of this white thing is a color, and the meaning of this color white cannot be defined. It is simply a description. But when we're thinking about things like night and day, again, a description always exists in comparison. When we're thinking about things like night and day, these two things do not exist alone. If there was only nighttime, then we would not need the word to describe it because it would be the only thing that is. So why would we add a description? A description is only necessary when we compare two things. And this is very important for the brain to realize that everything happens simultaneously. There is no doer, first of all. We're not doing the poker decisions. So this idea that we are collecting, I don't know how to break it. That might be a little bit too direct. But we're not the one that is doing the poker decisions. We are simply observing the thoughts in our minds. And the free will that we actually have is basically to put ourselves in a good situation, like sit and meditate for an hour before we play a poker session or after we play a poker session, even more productive, because we might be able to like think about hands that played and concentrate on them. That would be way more better than studying because we don't need additional information. We actually need to be able to organize and sort through the current model that we have, and look for falsehoods within the model and remove them. We don't need to add more things on top of it which might be predicated on current falsehoods. It's like adding more and more and more and more and more to a house when it's freezing cold. We don't have air conditioning, we don't have anything, but all we're doing is just buying tons and tons of furniture because we imagine that when someone comes over, they will enjoy it. But actually, we're in the fucking Arctic. We don't even have a heater. We don't have anything. We don't have, you know what I'm saying? It's just like not a good situation. We have to think about the foundation. I could have given a better analogy. Forgive me. That was quite a poor analogy. But you see, this is the Tao that Lao Tzu wrote spoke about things mutually arising. And there's this idea from the Tao that a good ruler will simply allow things to happen. He will not try to control everything. He will not try to think about what everybody is doing. We need to control them. We need to get them and make them work. We need to tell them that if you say this, we're going to imprison you. No. Confucius was the opposite. He was a real cunt. Absolutely the opposite. No interest in you. He didn't give a fuck about you. He didn't give a fuck about me. He didn't care about the individual. He cared about the society, but the society doesn't exist except through the individual. We are not people in the society. We are not. It's just a dream. It's just the way that man ordinarily perceives reality. So in order to get past this initial perception of seeing everything through the psychological lens of this board comes out, how does it relate to me making rent money in the future? That's not a strategic decision. In fact, it's in the unconscious and we're not even aware of how much these things control. And in fact, the perceiver might even sit there and listen to the voice in his head that says, no, that's not me. Again, I think that this will probably be far too painful for people to listen to. It will have to take a very great amount of maturity and already willingness to even listen to this kind of shit because it's fucking painful and because it goes against everything that we're taught. And how do we know which one is right? We don't know. So if we're very foolish, then we will say, I know it's this one. Of course, we can't just say we don't know, because if we don't know, then all sorts of doubts will creep into our head. What we don't understand is that these doubts are self-created by the totality of our past beliefs. But we don't want to identify with these beliefs. So we want to put them on an external agency. When the card comes out on the river and we get 3 outed, I get very angry, I'm entitled. And I don't want to admit that this is just my own delusion that it means something, that it matters, but actually it's my nervous system training. So this reaction, this anger is coming from my belief that it means something. And I can say logically, no, it doesn't mean anything because I'm not going to get whatever, but then I have this reaction. Well, obviously I know I'm lying to myself. It means a great deal if I have such a great emotional reaction, but it's too painful to say that for most people. It takes a great amount of bravery and courage, to be honest. It takes an amazing amount of bravery and courage, to be honest. Someone like Aristotle, who was the disciple of a very, very, very wise man named Socrates, who gave an amazing analogy, the cave analogy, which spoke about how people were not really able to see reality. It was as if they were in a cave, they were chained in a cave, and there was a fire behind them, and all they saw, the reality that they saw, was simply shadows. Now, we don't know anything about Socrates. We only know about Socrates. Excuse me, did I just say Socrates and Aristotle? That was very foolish. It was actually Plato, and I wanted to make a point. But Plato also wrote the Republic, and he wrote a tremendous amount about logic. So they're all actually, these are all philosophers, and these are all logicians and people that we can think about. Plato was absolutely brilliant. But I wanted to make a point about Isaac Newton and the previous system of logic, which we perceived reality, which everybody in the world was absolutely certain was correct, which is the only model that we use. And if people said differently, we used to cut their heads off. We used to get very, very angry. There was a point about when Galileo realized that the sun does not revolve around the earth. He started speaking about truth. Remember, a book does not have authority that was written many thousands of years ago that says that the sun revolves around the earth. That doesn't mean anything. It's a bunch of bullshit fantasies because the ego of man thinks that man is everything. No, man is just a monkey. He's nothing. He's just a monkey. He's a biological machine. He's going to come, he's going to live, he's going to poop, he's going to sleep, he's going to eat, he's going to die. There's nothing special about man, but it hurts his ego. It's very, very painful. Because we're told that we need to be somebody, and if we're not somebody, then we're bad. But actually, we're already perfect. So it actually comes from a false belief. This is the reason why we want to be somebody, because we already believe that we're not good enough. A dog doesn't have this insecurity. A dog simply is, because he's not been conditioned to go, 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 and be a slave to the society his whole life until he dies. No, he's just very natural and happy all the time, as long as he's well fed. Very, very happy. So Isaac Newton created this theory where the universe worked in this way as if the whole universe was like a big billiard ball table, like an 8-ball pool table, or what is that game called? Snooker, right? So there would be one ball, say the white ball breaks and it smashes into all the other balls. But this is like cause and effect, right? So like the white ball first, we think of the frame, this is the white ball. And then we say we hit it. So why does the white ball hit the other balls? Well, because we hit it. We haven't asked like, well, how did the white ball get on the table? No, it's not because you hit it, it's because you put it on the table and you hit it. Oh, well, how did you get here? Oh, well, you drove in a car. Well, it's because you drove the car and then you put it on the table and then you hit it. No, like this is all true, but see, the brain cannot think in this way because then it doesn't have certainty. It's very painful for the brain. So Mr. Newton, a very, very intelligent man, absolutely brilliant, and helped us tremendously with our model of reality and our comfort level currently. Absolutely brilliant man. Gave the model that life worked in cause and effect. Same Aristotle, he wrote a lot on cause and effect. Very similar logic systems, this Aristotelian approach to life. Now, if you look at the East, they're not so foolish, they're not so stupid, because they don't just simply assume that this white ball is here, and that's the only frame in which we can look at it from. We cannot question how did it get there, and if you do, that's a dumb question. No, of course not. All questions are the same. They're all equal. There's no stupid questions. All these things are equivalent. So it's getting out of this kind of delusion of how the brain automatically attaches to conflict solution. Now, it's funny, today we have enough understanding about the way that relationships works, or the way that kind of the relationships between multiple things in the universe kind of simultaneously arrives. It's not a doing, it's just a happening. There's no cause that did something. But if you look at the justice system, for instance, when someone gets hurt, the first thing that the prosecutor does, say like someone has some sickness, the first thing say they'll be like, oh, I think maybe like we're going to look for some malplay. And this is a good strategy to be able to protect the people, because we are monkeys in a society and we don't want random, very violent, ill people to go and harm innocent people, right? But we have to understand that, first of all, like when we're even making an investigation, because we are investigators when we play poker. In fact, we have to be much deeper psychologists, because we have to be much more direct, because we don't get to fantasize about all these millions of variables in the world and the politics and, you know, getting in trouble with our boss if we don't get someone arrested and blah, 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 and the news media and getting pressured from other people. No, we don't have to deal with that. There's no politics at all. So actually, we have a much better time being honest than we would in, say, a political job like an investigator or a scientist, where you have to do lots of politics with the people in the universities. Poker, we don't have that. We're so fucking lucky. We are absolutely lucky. Now, the theory of relativity destroys this billiard idea. Absolutely destroys it. Because we understand things are relative. Things are not there in them of itself. So you cannot just say this ball hits it because of that. No, everything is relative. Relativity destroys this entire idea. Absolutely destroys it. And it's very important to understand this, because the way that the brain understands the nodes of the game trees, all the leaves, all the payoffs, what can you really say about it? You can't directly know those things. And there's no futuristic game trees. When I make this decision right now, they're doing that. No, all these things are mutually happening, even though, no, sure, you only have your decision, but from a more holistic perspective, this decision is only derived from the payoffs in all these other situations and how you expect your opponent to play. And that's why you're making the decision. And that comes from your beliefs about how to play poker, your beliefs about what they are doing. Or you can say knowledge, maybe you can say observable facts or patterns within PioSolver, but it's still kind of perceived as a belief for the most part. It's interesting. Let's say, for instance, that the board is like Queen Jack 10, and we're like button versus big blind. We RFI'd preflop, and the big blind is in the big blind. We go 2.5x he calls. The board is Queen Jack 10. Okay, so the brain, say we have a hand. Now, the mind might say, well, we should look at this first, or we should look at that first. No, these things are all happening. So you cannot like solve stupid problems like saying, I'm going to organize when I study poker. I'm only going to think about this or that. No, then you've already fallen trap and you're already done. Game over. Solve the wrong problems. Improve very inefficiently. There's no one thing to cling on to. The game is far more complex than that, but the brain needs certainty. So let's say there's this thought that arises when we see the board. All that's come out is we've RFI'd. Now we get on the phone. We see the board. Okay, and actually before we RFI, we should already start to think about how this guy is playing. Is this guy like 3-betting us too often? Okay, well, what does that mean? Just because he 3-bets us too often doesn't mean that we cannot RFI. Because maybe he calls a bunch post-flop or calls a bunch pre, and then he folds as well. And then we make a bunch of EV. And then when he 3-bets, in fact, say he 3-bets way too often, and then say way over folds to a 4-bet. Because he's the guy that 3-bets that thinks that we don't 4-bet. So in fact, RFIing 7-2 offsuit and then 4-betting it would be higher EV than open folding it. And that's a very easy mathematical thing to choose. And in fact, there are a lot of people that 3-bet 13%, 14%, and 6-max who way overfold the 4-bet. And in fact, you can get them in situations where they call flops, turns, and then fold the river in these 4-bet pots because they're too wide and they don't believe that they're bluffing. And that's the whole predication on them 3-betting you too much to begin with. So there are ways to work these things out, but the brain cannot work in this one-dimensional, I have a thought. I think that this guy will fold a lot on the flop to this size bet. But then on the turn, I think he has like so many like call folds that he will not fold enough. So if I'm going to bluff, I'm only going to bluff once. Okay, this is great. So there's no like, yes, solution. There's just an idea, but the brain always wants a solution. Cling to solution. No, this is an idea. Let's go to another idea. Let's explore another idea. Okay, so he's going to have a whole bunch of calls on the turn, and then he's going to get to river very weak. And what does that mean? Is he just going to end up calling everything on the river when he's weak? So does that mean that when he gets to when there's like a flush on the river, he's just going to end up calling all these hands? So if that's the case, that he calls the turn too wide and then say he just calls GTO on the river. Say we bet pot, he calls 50%, okay? This is not GTO, but let's just, pretend that there aren't so many variables that are complex. For a moment, for the sake of kind of getting to the main principle. Now, if that's the case, then if we know that he's calling so often on the river, then we can say that, hey, the payoffs of having, say, a backdoor flush on the river, which is going to be the nuts, is way higher than, say, checking back the flop. Is it? Well, this is a question. We don't know that this is the case. So then we can say, well, first of all, why is that the case? Because the pot will be very big. When we bet, and then bet again, the pot will be so big and we'll have a flush. And this flush has so much EV in this node in the end of the game tree that we should be putting shit tons of money in flop turn river. And then we can say, well, no, this is not true. This is a comparative thing. This is also true. Okay, so it's comparative. What do we compare it to? So then we compare it to, say, like, we check back the flop. And then we say that this guy thinks, this guy, he doesn't check back any backdoor flush draws. So whenever a flush comes, when I bet turn and then the flush comes on the river, my top pair is still good, so I'm just going to go pot twice. And now this guy is going very, very thin and putting shit tons of money in turn and river versus the check back. Not only that versus the check back, after he ends up betting the turn with a turn probe, when he checks, he's check folding most hands because he's mostly betting good hands draws and he's checking and folding weak hands. So we could actually, rather than bet and then having to give up on this turn on the flop, again, Queen Jack 10, rather than betting the flop and then having to give up on the turn because we think he's going to call, we simply can check back and let him bet his good hands tell us, and then we can delay. And then bet and bluff. So see, the brain wants a solution though. But no, we have to keep going. We have to keep going. Then we say, well, wait a second. If this guy is going to call, and then say, on the river, what is he really going to do with like Jack 9? he's going to fucking fold. He's not going to call a triple. Or if he calls, then we know, okay, this is the guy that thinks on these scary textures we overbluff. And then if he's very intelligent and he's very adaptive, then we cannot just say those silly statements and then make predictions about the future. But at least we have a little bit of information as to how he's playing. It depends on the stakes, it depends on the opposition, it depends on how much we want to adjust. It's very complex, but the point is destroying the mechanism that wants to find a solution. Because the mechanism that wants to find a solution is simply arising from psychological pain, which is unconscious, normally through the thought process of, I'm trying to get better at poker. But no, that whole thing is just trying to fill this sort of pain that we've been trained with through the education system by saying A, B, C, D, but reality is not like that. This is just the training to make people work in factories. This is not the training to expand your mind to become a poker player. They're very different. One does not need expansion of mind to become a poker player and win. One simply needs to expand his mind if he's a poker player, if he wants to actually understand how the game works and have a lot of fun and make it very enjoyable and know why his opponents are doing things. And be able to do whatever the fuck they want on the fly. It's beautiful. Absolutely brilliant. It's fantastic. I think I'm going to finish this up. It's been about 46 minutes. Well, I'm going to pause this and see if anything else arises, and then I'll either finish it off or not. But I love you all so much. And mwah. So given that there's a bit more on the poker video, I'm just going to continue to talk, but you can certainly turn off the video now, and this is me filling in the gap, so forgive me. But I'll just tell a story. It's a little bit fun anyways. But there was a very great Buddhist monk, man of enlightenment, about 20-something hundred years ago. Okay. And the man's name was Noxan. And there was a king, he was the viceroy of Alexander the Great. And when Alexander the Great left India, he left his viceroy, Milinda, this was his name. He left him over there and he asked this great Buddhist monk who was a man that no one else has ever seen anything like. No one else has ever been in the presence of someone like this. It is as if he walks on the earth, but he's not of the earth. There's a sort of mysterious aroma around this man. There's a depth, there's a peace, there's an equanimity that this man has that we've never seen in anybody else. This is how the king felt. So the king, Malin, sent his messenger to Noxan. And Noxan said, absolutely, I'm very happy to come, when he was invited by the messenger. But you should tell the king that there's no one like me. So, if I come, I am no more, so no one will come. And the messenger was very puzzled, he was very surprised. He went back to the king, and the king said, what the fuck is this guy talking about? He's talking about this in puzzles, what is he going on? It doesn't make very much sense. But Malind was Greek, the viceroy of Alexander. And the Greek mind is very logical, one-dimensional. Just as I was talking about Aristotle before. Just as I was talking about Socrates. Just as I was talking about Plato. This mind has this presupposition that this white ball has always been here and it cannot think outside of that frame. It doesn't have the capacity because it will argue with logic. And it doesn't understand that logic is not reality. Logic is just logic. And basically, this mystic, Noxan, who is a man of enlightenment, a Buddhist enlightened bodhisattva, or maybe even deeper than that, excuse me, very deep, this man is absolutely illogical, is absolutely contradictory. And the Greeks always want everything to be defined. They want everything to be classified. They only walk on the straight path because they're terrified of anything else. But because they don't want to admit this terror, because they want certainty. They simply use logic to try to pretend that these other ways are somehow not good enough or whatever. But it's simply a defense mechanism, because if they truly admit that actually there's no way to know, it would be very painful. And their entire attempt at logic is to know. By definition, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to, basically, they're trying to feel better in their own skin unconsciously by playing this game of logic without realizing that it's beyond that. Now, if you see a lot of contradictions in the things that I'm saying, don't even worry about it. It's basically how we make new connections and associations in poker. Because a contradiction only means that the perceiver has not made that connection yet. There's no such thing as a contradiction. If you can perceive contradiction, it means you have not made a connection yet. If someone can perceive a contradiction in you, it means they don't understand themselves. And again, this is only from one perspective. Again, we can use other perspectives where this is true. But bear with me. There are no contradictions that are in existential reality. Meaning physical reality is, you cannot say that it is not. That physical reality contradicts itself. Only ideas versus other ideas, if you can even know what those two things mean and see what they are and try to compare them, even though they're all pictorial thought. But it's very hard to differentiate pictorial thought and reality, because very often we see reality and then we put things on top of it unconsciously, the meanings. So in poker, like, going into these contradictions is actually it's the most efficient way to learn, not the only way to learn, the most efficient way to learn by far is to look at our self-contradictions directly and try to love them and enjoy them and see them and not like feel bad about them. It's actually the way that we learn. But in the education system, we're plotted against one another. We're told that you see this guy over here, he's good, and we see the teacher patting him on the back, we see the teacher being nice to him, and then we see the teacher not being so nice to the children that are rude. The education system, we treat all the people the same, blah, blah. It's all bullshit. We're completely incentivized to just get the right answer out of multiple choice until our brains become so corrupted that we believe that this is the nature of reality. It's not. It's just a utilitarian slavery mechanism to make people work for you. Scientists don't think in those terms. At least they shouldn't. Mathematicians have a much deeper imagination than your ordinary politicians, than your ordinary slaves of society. Because it takes a mind that does not just work in conflict solution. It takes a mind that's able to see the totality. So Milland invited Noxan to come. He said, okay, I'm the king, come to my court. So he says, yes, I'm going to come. So they send a bullock cart, and Milland receives Noxan at the gate. And he says, the first thing he says, maybe it's a little bit rude, whatever, but he says, it's funny, you said you are not, yet you have come. And Noxan replies, yes, and I still say I'm not. So let's settle it here. Let's settle the confusion. And as he says this, a big crowd gathers. They've been expecting this great wise monk. For a long time they've been talking about him. They have no other monks like this around. And Noxan says, still, I am not. So Noxan says, how about take a look at this bullock cart? Is this bullock? Is this animal driving this cart? Is this the cart? And Milland says, of course not. It's a cow. How are you going to say that this is the cart? What a foolish idea. So he says, okay, great, remove the cow. Get him out of here. It's not the cart. He says, okay. And they take one piece out. They take the wheel out. And Noxan says, is this the cart? And he says, no. The king says, no, it's not. Of course, don't be foolish. By and by, they take one piece after another piece, and everything is removed. And he asks, so where's the cart that I came in? We never removed the cart. Every single piece I asked you, is this the cart? And you said no. Simple logic, isn't it? But where is it? So just like Noxan says that the cart doesn't exist, our thoughts about poker, this solution that we've created doesn't exist. This solution is a combination or a collection of ideas that our brain compartmentalizes and then spits out a solution, but we have to be willing to question our own solutions. Now, what Noxan said is that he himself is a combination of parts. The way that this relates to poker is that everything that arises on that board, Queen, Jack 10, the thoughts that come up, the first one is not real, it's just a thought, it's not right. Any identification other than it being an observation that you can argue with, any attachment is pure mental illness, it's pure delusion. Don't take it lightly, I'm very serious. And not in a negative way where we feel bad, and there's not mental illness in the sense that we are bad, and the whole world is mentally ill because the whole world kills each other and hates each other and makes war even though that we have enough food to eat. Like, we're monkeys, we could just live for like 70 years without any drama, and then instead, like, we all just need to make drama for no reason. People even do things like watch the news. Why would someone do something like that? Why would someone waste their energy? Because they want to kind of continue this model of the world in their mind and then compare themselves to it unconsciously. So they say, I want to talk about things with people. No, but this is just slavery of society. They don't solve the right problems for well-being because they don't understand well-being. It's very painful stuff to talk about. Now, this is important. Just as a combination of lines, now we can ask, right? We can ask a physicist. Not a religious man, not some fucking person on the news that's saying America is amazing or America is bad or this country is good or bad. No, not this retardation, this very slow thinking. Not at all. Not at all. It doesn't have anything to do with that. What arises on Queen Jack 10 is a combination of ideas, but we have synthesized them because our brain is so intelligent, and then it's created an identity, an opinion, an attachment to one of those thoughts. But the ordinary mind is so slow that it believes in its own thoughts and it doesn't have the capacity to question. And when it questions its own thoughts, it starts to feel like these negative emotions arise. Those are fine. Don't ever suppress those. But be aware that no one is punching you in the gut. No one is killing you. Nobody is hurting you. What's happening is that your identity, you've obviously unconsciously or consciously identified with these ideas in your mind about what is good and bad in poker. And then your brain is creating a sort of reminder system, the same way if you put your hand over fire, there's a reminder system through your nervous system. Actually, all the neurons are hijacking your nervous system through your thoughts in no different of a way. Again, if you hear a roar in front of you, you don't see a lion. There's no way that you don't see the lion eating you currently. So you're having pictorial thoughts about what it might do. And this is not conscious. It's like, roar, boom, now we know what's going on. We're fucking on the fight, because we're not going to fight a lion unless you have some very large testicles. But I do not. I am very terrified of lions. I don't want them to eat me. You may be a very big, bad man, but I am not. I'm a very scared boy. I don't want them to eat me, you know? My cat is kind of scary, but a lion, jeez. I've seen what my cat does to a mouse. I would just be the mouse to a lion. But thank goodness my brain gives me this information. Now, I heard a roar, and then it happened to be the TV. And then I realized, oh my God, I was just believing that there was a lion in back of me that was going to kill me. I was running all these scenarios, and it was just the TV. Now, I mean, this is a little bit of a silly example. I don't think that most of us live around lions, but we can get the point. In fact, 2 million years ago, we were simply living in caves and very lucky if we weren't eaten by predators. Our life expectancy was 30 years. We were mostly the prey of bigger animals. And we were very lucky when we found the ability to use fire and fight them off. It's one of the largest advances that we've made in human history. And agriculture as well, where we were not constantly having to forage, but we could create our own shelters where these giant animals were not able to kill us and get in. It was extremely helpful to building the society. And there's nothing bad to say about this. I say the society is sick and bad, but I'm not condemning it. There's no condemnation in me saying that. I'm saying a spade is a spade. So we don't need to be a slave to it. But it's something that arises in reality. So any like resentment, resistance of the society, these are more emotions that are happening within us. It's the same phenomenon. It's no different. So all these thoughts that arise are just a bunch of crisscrossing lines of energy. So a physicist would say, these are all a bunch of crisscrossing lines of energy. But if you take one thought and you examine it and really go deeply until it hurts, then you remove that and you realize, oh yeah, that certainty was just like an illusion. I was scared to admit that, like, yeah, that was just an idea. It wasn't reality, but I just can't differentiate them. Then you remove another line, another line, another line, another line, another idea about this spot until you have no more dot, and you realize that that dot, that piece of information, that idea was just an illusion. That certainty, that knowledge was just an illusion. But anyways, I'm going to get off of here now. I love you all so much. Forgive me, I'm not a very good speaker, and I'm not very articulate, and I'm a little bit slow and stuff, but I appreciate everything, and if you have any questions, I would love you to comment so that I can maybe talk about specific things. Yeah, also, I'm not enlightened. I basically don't know very much about this stuff, but I do have a teacher, by the way, who I learned a lot from. And if any of the ideas that I'm saying resonate with you, you can go on Quora. This is where I started questioning the nature of reality in poker because I was trying to get better at poker, and I read like hundreds. I have a library of about 1,000 books, and I read many, many hundreds of books about poker psychology, trying to get better. I couldn't find anything. And then I went to Quora, and I went on the internet, tried to find people after people. I found one guy. His name is Artem Boytsov. ARTEMBOYTSOV. Artem Boytsov on Quora. He has, now it pained me to read it. When I was reading it, sometimes I was crying, sometimes I was angry and I wanted to kill him, sometimes I wanted to send him a message and say, fuck you, like something like that very often was arising. Of course, I didn't realize that, oh wow, all these emotions are happening in me. It's not because of him. My brain is just having feelings, but that's what was going on. But it challenged a lot of my beliefs until my capacity to believe certain things kind of got destroyed. And that did not happen from anything else that I read. So when I think that he's a fairly good resource if anybody did relate to any of the things that I say, because I'm essentially just kind of attempting to put his words in a more like poker framework thing, because this mind expansion stuff, it has nothing to do with poker. But if we're trying to make money at poker and get better, I mean, that's what I'm doing it for personally. It's deeper than just poker, it's life, but it's beautiful. So, okay, love you all. Bye, 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 bye. Okay, very nice. So I'm going to be making a video today. Hello, my lovely friends. Hope you all are having a wonderful day. I'm going to talk a little bit about poker, but again, I don't think I'm good enough strategically at the moment, and I don't want to have so many strategic conversations. I do want to talk about mental game. I do want to talk about the aspects